righty. Thank you all for coming, especially my friends Sandra and Cheryl, my besties. You need to know that I bawl like this. At everything like this, I just start crying. And so we're just, get out your Kleenex because you're going to cry with me. Because you'll feel sorry for me. Not that I'm going to say, anything that we all need to cry about, but it's just you're going to go, that poor girl. And then you're going to start crying, and then we're all just going to get out the Kleenex. All right. Hi. I'm Karen. And I need new glasses, so you'll have to bear with me here. As Jeannie Bartell so eloquently says, she is not extemporaneous, and I am a vocabulary junkie, and so I collected that word this year, and I'm not extemporaneous either, so we're going to have to somehow deal with the fact that I need new glasses. And it's not because I turned 65 this year at all. It's just I need new glasses. And anyway, so yeah, I'm Karen. And I'm also known as Care because my dad has a rule about first names. They can only have one syllable or he'll give you a new one. My mom calls me Karen Marie, because she knows it takes 8 syllables and a sonic boom to get my attention and then keep it long enough for her to do something with it. My husband calls me Kate because he loves that line from The Quiet Man where Sean Thornton asked the town matchmaker if Mary Cat Danaher is married. And Micheline O'Flynn sniffs with utter disapproval and says, her? And with her freckles and her temper, I hear somebody else quoting this, that redhead of hers is no lie. The rest of my relatives call me Kristen and Carla because none of them can tell my sisters and me apart and keep us all properly labeled, even though Kristen is a tall Swedish blonde, Carla is a short Croatian brunette, and I am the only red-headed Yorkie sipping on English tea with a side of crumpets in the clan. I'm also called KJ here at the Sister Bees because, as you all know, we have a surplus of Carries, Karis, Kristens, Carlas, and Karens here at Faith Community Church. And the truth be told, Karen Anderson and Karen Edwards called first and second dibs on my birth name. So not fair. I've also been asked to tell you a little bit about myself, and so I had to come up with something about that this morning. And so anyway, have any of you ever seen the movie Ever After with Drew Barrymore and Doug Ray Scott? Okay, so basically I am Cinderella in that movie, and I married Prince Charming, personified. I love this guy. He's drives me crazy too. But anyway, I married Prince Charming, and we gave birth to Princess Leia, Han Solo, and Luke Skywalker, all of whom moved a minimum of 1,000 miles away from their mother because evidently I eat too fast, run too fast, walk too fast, talk too much, and say things mothers aren't allowed to say to their children these days, like, have you prayed about that? My passions in life are worshiping my Savior and the pursuit of biblical literacy. And I have a special interest in the Hebrew language, typology, and biblical algebra. If you want to know what that is, see me after class. Which means I believe the Bible is its best own interpreter. Basically, I collect vocabulary words. Some people collect spoons. I used to collect pianos. Let's move on. Okay. I had 5 at one time. It was so cool. I could just go from one to never mind. Let me start off by saying that I honestly believe that the scriptures do tell us that Proverbs 31 woman and Bathsheba are one and the same. However, after visiting with Pastor Michael this week, good shepherd that he is, I prayerfully and humbly need to say that until I can complete my research on the relationship between King David, Bathsheba, Solomon, and the Proverbs 31 woman, and learn how to communicate this information better, it would be unwise for me to share anything today on how it is these two biblical icons are or could be one and the same. And so, I will not be teaching on Proverbs 31 today. Please forgive me and thank you for your understanding. Also, Thank you, Sharon and Paula, for inviting me to be part of this teaching series. For those of you who may be new here, we have been digging into the life stories of several prominent women in the Bible and asking two important questions as we do. One, what does this woman's story teach us about living as a woman of faith? And two, what does this woman's story teach us about who God is? It's a powerful recipe Paula came up with. One is sound doctrine, one is theology. Put those two together, yeah, you got a good thing going. Okay, thus far, we have studied Eve, Sarah, and Hagar, Ruth and Naomi, Deborah and Jael, Mary, the mother of Jesus, Dinah and Tamar, Mary and Martha of Bethany, Mary Magdalene, and the Samaritan woman. Next month, Paula is going to be teaching on Miriam, and we're all going to be praying for Karen, who is having eye surgery. Today, we will be studying one of the most often misinterpreted women in the Old Testament, Bathsheba, a woman most often remembered as the woman who committed adultery with King David while her husband was away at war, a choice that left her pregnant, grieving the death of her husband, and single-step parenting her husband's orphaned children. Bet you didn't know that. And single parenting her husband's orphaned children the moment her royal lover had Uriah the Hittite murdered to cover up the affair. Let's begin with prayer. Father, once again, I need your help. Thank you for the privilege of sharing Bathsheba's life story today with my friends. Help us to set aside any preconceived ideas we may have about this little ewe lamb, and help us to comprehend the powerful testimony of your forgiveness, mercy, justice, relentless love, and amazing grace her story contains. To you alone be the glory and the honor. In Jesus' name, amen. So did any of you have a chance to talk over the question about Bathsheba during lunch? If Bathsheba were sitting here today, sipping tea with a side of crumpets with us, what question would you ask her first? Anybody want to answer that? Jamie, what question would you ask her? Why did you take a shower? All right. Yeah. Diane, what would you ask her first? Don't know. Oh, yeah, okay. Anybody else? Yeah, Patty.
How much choice did you have in this matter?
Oh, yeah. Well, let's get in. Paula.
How did you conquer the bitterness?
Yeah. All right, let's get into this. How about my little riddle? Did anybody take a stab at the math in there? As we shall soon see, the answer to the question is 1 times 3 plus 1 equals 2. And this is why I love biblical algebra. 1 times 3, the triune God, plus 1, Uriah the Hittite, equals 2. So, shall we begin this bedtime story? Once upon a time, in a land far, far away, a baby girl was born in Gilo, a small city just a couple hours from Jerusalem. It is 1010 BC, the same year King Saul and Jonathan died, and the same year David has just been crowned Israel's second king over Judah. It is a turbulent time in Israel's history. It has been 40 years since Israel fired God as their king and demanded Samuel give them an earthly king to rule over them, lead them into battle, judge them, and to worship as a god, just like all the other nations in the neighborhood worshiped their kings as gods. The consequence of Israel's treason has cost its people dearly. Under Saul's leadership, the sons and daughters of this generation were drafted to serve in King Saul's army or conscripted into forced labor. Their lands were confiscated, their assets seized. 10% of everything they owned was tithed to this insecure, insane, manufactured idol. With the deaths of King Saul and Jonathan, Bathsheba's father and grandfather are two of the patriots who put David on the throne of Judah. Bathsheba's story begins here, as told through the names of the peaches on her family tree. All right, Bathsheba's grandfather was Ahithophel the Gilonite, also known as the king's counselor. He was a Judean genius, so revered for his wisdom, political prowess, and legal counsel to King David that he was likened to being an oracle of God. He was also one of the mighty men of strength, 37 of King David's most skilled, courageous, decorated, and heroic military officers. Today we would call these guys the Navy SEALs. Hoorah! Her father was Eliam the Gileadite, also a Judean patriot, who was so loyal to King David and the tribe of Judah that it sounds like he put these in his military career before God, and may even have changed his birth name, Eliam, to Amiel, to boastfully herald his political convictions wherever he walked. Like his father Ahithophel, Eliam was also a valiant officer in service to King David as one of the mighty men of strength. And now you know why I collect vocabulary words instead of pianos. Okay. Bathsheba's mother could have been, Bathsheba's mother's name, say that 3 times fast, could have been Sheba, but more likely she was a foreign woman from the nation of Sheba, whose birth name is not known. The Sabians were wealthy North African merchants who traded in frankincense, gold, myrrh, spices, ivory, precious gemstones, peacocks, and just about anything else prized as valuable all over the ancient world. Bathsheba's mother had 7 daughters and 1 son, Machir, who grew up to be a wealthy merchant, possibly just like his mother's Sabian relatives, instead of lacing up his army sandals to follow in the mighty military footsteps of his father and grandfather, as was the custom. Bathsheba's parents gave their youngest daughter a very unique name, which, like most birth names in the Bible, tell us something about what was going on in the life of her father at the time she was conceived. That might be something different than you've heard before. The name Bathsheba is a compound word made by linking the Hebrew word Bath, which means daughter, to the word Sheba, which in both Hebrew and Arabic means 7 and a sworn and binding oath. In the Bible, the number 7 represents a complete set of something, as in the 7 days of creation, the 7 feasts of the Lord, the 7 trumpets. To summarize, Bathsheba's very unusual name tells us she was the last-born daughter in a complete set of 7 daughters born to the illegitimate marriage between her Jewish father and her Sabian mother through the swearing of a binding and irrevocable oath. Basically, there were 2 ways a man got married at this time in biblical history. Legitimate way number 1, you honored your father by trusting him to choose a bride and arrange a marriage for you, a lengthy, multi-stepped process which took years to accomplish, including the payment of a bride price, the transfer of the bride's government to her bridegroom, and the cutting of a blood covenant to seal the transaction. Now, the illegitimate way to do this was you dishonored your father by trusting yourself, doing what was right in your own eyes, choosing your own bride, and arranging your own marriage by binding yourself to the woman of your choice with a rope and swearing an oath with her. Bathsheba's parents chose what was behind door number 2, Monty, which, among other things, made all of their children illegitimate and unentitled to their father's inheritance if their father died. A widow and her children, under these circumstances, were returned to her relatives for governing and financial support if a man had arranged his own marriage with a rope and an oath. Sadly, it also appears Bathsheba's mother passed away soon after her youngest daughter entered puberty. In 2 Samuel 12:3, Nathan the prophet describes this event in her life in vivid biblical imagery, saying, "There were 2 men in one city, one rich and the other poor. The rich man had exceedingly many flocks and herds, which means wives and kinsmen. But the poor man had nothing, no herds, meaning no kinsmen, no flocks, meaning wives and concubines and, a harem. The poor man had nothing but one little ewe lamb, that's Bathsheba, which he bought and nourished, and he brought it up. That's a key phrase there. And it grew up with him and with his children. That's another important thing to watch out for. And it used to eat of his morsel and drink from his cup and lie in his arms, and it was like a daughter to him. Let's unpack a piece of this parable, just a little. In biblical times, mothering a child was done quite differently from the way it is done today. In 1000 BC, a mother weaned her daughter at the age of 6. That is counted from conception, so in English that's 5¼ years. And then she spent the next 10 years bringing her daughter up to be ready for marriage. Ideally, at about the age of 16, although a daughter could become legally betrothed at any time after her first period, and therefore considered a woman now, capable of making her choice to marry or not. Okay? Remember, if any of you are unfamiliar with the Bible, this is a cultural thing back then. Nobody expects an 11-year-old to get married, in our culture today. So don't let that wig you out if you are not a Christian, if you are not familiar with the Bible and you're not familiar with the context that I just said that. During this 10-year bringing up phase, a daughter received training on how to be a woman, a wife, and a mother someday by helping her own mother with her next pregnancy, the birth, the care of her baby sibling, and the management of the household. When you do the math in this verse, it appears Bathsheba's mother died soon after she entered puberty, and therefore before her work with her youngest daughter was completed. In fact, it had just gotten started. Among other things, the death of Bathsheba's mother immediately created a problem for her father. A man you'll remember likely changed his birth name from Eliam to Amiel to boast wherever he walked that his priorities in life were his king, country, and career before God. How many of you know that self-centered men often also put themselves before their families too? Rahu. When you do the math and decipher the biblical imagery in Nathan the prophet's parable about the little ewe lamb, most of Bathsheba's 6 sisters would have been married off by now. But Eliam still had 2 or 3 children living at home in need of a mother to care for them and finish bringing them up, especially when he was deployed for war. If any of you just think I'm making this stuff up, just come see me, we'll talk. Circumstantial evidence suggests Eliam solved this problem by, 1, transferring the government of his only illegitimate son, Machir, to his late wife's relatives in Sheba for them to finish bringing him up, and by transacting a marriage for his youngest illegitimate daughter. The Bible doesn't tell us the rest of the details, but it does tell us who offered himself and his life to Bathsheba with a proposal of marriage: Uriah the Hittite, a converted foreigner who was also both an officer in the ranks of the mighty man of strength and a man who just happened to have the same problem his little green army buddy Eliam has. He too is a widower with young children in need of a stepmother for his kids and someone to help him manage his household, small as it is, especially when he deployed to war. I can't help but notice the difference between these 2 men. And if my interpretation is correct, and I'm correctable, come see me. 1, it appears Eliam, the self-centered man who put himself before God, solved his problem by finding a way to abandon his responsibilities to his youngest children in favor of serving himself and having someone else finish bringing up his kids for him. And it appears Uriah, the God-centered man who put God before himself, solved his problem by finding a way to take care of his young children, by serving their needs ahead of his, and finding an easer, Paula's word for us this year, a helpmate who could help him finish bringing them up himself. Uriah's choice paints a beautiful picture of what Jesus cited as being the greatest of the commandments. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment, and the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. This brings us to Bathsheba's betrothal. Uriah the Hittite, Bathsheba's first husband, the man she agreed to marry when she accepted three things: all that he was, is to come, and has in the life he had already freely offered her, the bride price he paid to ensure her future, the transfer of her government from her father's Eliam's shoulders to his shoulders, and the covenant that was cut to seal the deal in her father's front yard. The moment she accepted these four things, the young couple was legally married for life. The wedding will come later, on a day of his father's choosing, but for now, the bridegroom Uriah was completely responsible for her life, her government, her subsistence, her protection, everything. In picturesque biblical imagery, the process by which marriages were arranged paints a picture of Christ, whose father has arranged a marriage between the bridegroom Jesus, who has come to the house of the bride's father to ask her to accept all that the bridegroom Jesus was, and is to come, and has for us in the life in him he has freely offered mankind. The bride price he has paid to ensure our future, the transfer of my government from my father's shoulders to his shoulders, the moment I accepted his offer of his free gift of salvation, and the covenant that he cut to seal the deal in my father's front yard. Oh, I'm gonna cry. Oh, I'm gonna cry. Here we go. Kiss and cry, kiss and cry. I love that. Okay. If we accept our bridegroom, Jesus will return to carry his bride away to the home he has prepared for us, consummate his marriage, and then together we will attend the marriage supper his father has been hosting in anticipation of our arrival. And we will listen to the story his father will tell about his son's accomplishment on our behalf, his bride. And I will get to hear him say to his son these words: well done, my son. All right, getting back to Bathsheba's betrothal, which paints this amazing picture. Let's talk about the bridegroom, about her bridegroom, Uriah the Hittite. What a stud muffin. I like this little green army guy. Yeah? Let me tell you why. The language of the Hittites was Luwian, an Indo-European language. However, Uriah's name is a Hebrew word. Got to collect them Hebrew words. It's like, they're almost like bonbons, you know? All right, you know those little ice cream ones with the chocolate on them and all of the Rice Krispies? Yeah, Avenel knows what I'm talking about. Oh, yeah. Every time I find one of those bonbons, I just go, I got to eat more of those. Okay, got to collect it. It's much easier than collecting pianos. However, Uriah's name is a Hebrew word, which means Jehovah is my light flame. This is important because in addition to writing and speaking a different language than Israel, the Hittites worshipped severe weather gods, including and primarily Ereniti, the goddess of sun, light, and flame. For a Hittite warrior to be wearing this particular Hebrew name tells us Uriah chose to forsake the goddess Ereniti in favor of worshiping Jehovah as his one true light flame. God, I love it. I love this guy. Now, Uriah could have arranged an illegitimate marriage to Bathsheba, and probably with her father's approval too, just as he had done with a rope and an oath to marry Bathsheba's mother. However, Uriah, having forsaken the goddess Ereniti, was a converted believer, determined to honor God in all his ways. And so he chose to have his marriage legitimately arranged, so that in the event of his death, both his wife, his children, and any other children that would have come along would be entitled to his estate and not left widowed and orphaned with no means of supporting themselves. So let's stop the bus for a moment because we need to stop and think about this. For a marriage to be legitimate, it had to be arranged by a man's father or the person in his tribe in authority over him, the next person. However, in 2 Samuel 12:3, Nathan the prophet, in his parable about the little ewe lamb, tells us Uriah had nothing. Specifically, he had no herds. Herds are blood-related kinsmen, which means he had no blood-related kinsmen. No tribe, no father, no uncle, no one in Israel in authority over him, except for his king. and God above and beyond that. In fact, the only persons in authority over this Hittite orphan and widower, how do you say that? Or any other converted foreigner living among the people of Israel qualified to arrange Uriah's marriage were King David and God himself. The Bible doesn't outright tell us that King David arranged Uriah and Bathsheba's betrothal, but it's likely that he did. This also solved a problem for all of the parties involved. Eliam and Uriah both had the ability to report for duty and be deployable any moment King David had need of these two valuable officers. There were only 37 of them. And likewise, this was a smart match for Bathsheba too, as it was far more advantageous for her to be legally betrothed bride with an insured future over being the motherless, unfinished, seventh, illegitimate daughter of a father with a bullseye in his chest on any given spring day with no future whatsoever. And perhaps no other choice, if she said no, than to be sent off to Lode Bar with her brother to live with her late mother's relatives. If she said no to the dress and everything that came in the box with it. In those days, you were given one opportunity to, if a bridegroom came and he cut covenant in your front yard and he paid a bride price and if he was following the script, she had the opportunity to accept or reject that gift of life that he was offering her. And if she said no, she would remain a spinster in her father's house for the rest of her life. There wasn't going to be another better guy to come along. It was like, are you going to accept Uriah when he made this offer? Or are you going to say no and be a spinster in your father's house or wherever he sent you for the rest of your life? That was her choice. An 11-year-old girl was given. Pretty impressive, huh? Okay. Bathsheba wisely accepted, and the couple became betrothed. Now, when you do the math, God, I love math. In 2 Samuel 12:3, Nathan's parable also tells us she was only about 11, and Uriah was about 27 or so. It also tells us Uriah finished bringing her up, which would be from age 11 to 16, from wherever it was her mother left off. I need to mention one other detail in Nathan's parable of the little ewe lamb. So we're looking again at this parable. She is one little ewe lamb, which he bought and nourished and brought up, and it grew up together with him and his children, and it used to eat of his morsel and drink from his cup and lie in his arms, and it was like a daughter to him. What does all that mean? In biblical imagery, the phrase, one little ewe lamb, tells us she was the runt of a litter of 3 lambs. I was just floored by that when I read it. In this case, the runt that it's being likened to, she was the runt in the last 3 of Eliam's litter of 8 illegitimate children. The runt of a litter of 3 lambs was smaller and weaker than the other 2 because it didn't get enough nourishment in the womb. It will quickly die without the immediate intervention of a shepherd, as a ewe has only 2 teats, and the healthier lambs will crowd out the runt triplet and keep it from its mother. And so the shepherd immediately takes the runt away from its mother and becomes its surrogate mother. He feeds it by hand. He carries it on his shoulders so that the other sheep don't trample it. He cradles it in his bosom to keep it warm and safe from predators, and he loves it like a daughter. We also need to look at Nathan's choice of the word little in Nathan's description of Uriah's little ewe lamb. In Hebrew, the word little, katan, means small, young, insignificant, and unimportant. Get your Kleenex ready. The root of this word is kut, and it brought tears to my eyes. It means to loathe, to feel a sense of loathing, to abhor, to be grieved, to be angry, to feel loathing for oneself, and to be broken. So it is now 995 BC. 5 years have passed since this broken little lamb accepted Uriah the Hittite. to be her lawfully wedded husband, while still grieving the loss of her mother. When you do the math, she is likely now 16 years of age, and Uriah is about 32. She is described as a ewe lamb now. She's not described as a little ewe lamb, which means Uriah has finished the work Bathsheba's mother started, and she is ready for marriage. She is healthy now, mature, and capable of bearing, nursing, and bringing up a child of her own, while managing their household with him and for him when he is deployed. Remember Paula's lesson on the Ezer. This isn't all about housework, ladies. It isn't all about all of these things. Helpmate, Ezer. Preach it, Paula. I'll turn your pages. All right. He has helped her overcome the death of her mother, and she has grown up together with him and his children. It is now time for the final steps of their arranged marriage to be completed. As soon as the king tells him his wedding day has arrived, on this day he will go and fetch his bride, consummate their marriage, and take a 7 to 14-day honeymoon. Before joining the marriage supper, the king has been hosting in their absence, and to hear the speech he has prepared celebrating their accomplishment, the conception of their first child. And then the king will close the wedding. But the wedding will have to wait a little longer. God has ordered King David to go conquer the Ammonites, a bloodthirsty pack of rabid redheads living on the other side of the Dead Sea, who worship Milcom, a god who demands the torture and sacrifice of infants and children, especially firstborns, by torturing them by fire and burning them alive on altars. It's horror on steroids. God has had it with these evil Satan worshipers. It's time for King David to saddle up his donkey, pick up his sword, move the Ark of the Covenant 65 miles due northeast, conquer these evil idolaters in full battle array, and put an end to this atrocity once and for all. Samuel tells us he did something else first. He stayed home in Jerusalem, walled in with all the other women and children of the city, and he sent Commander Joab, his cousin, all of the men of Israel, and the Ark of the Covenant to Rabbah, the capital city of Ammon. This brings us to the event in Bathsheba's life she is most famous for, the breaking of the sixth commandment. You shall not commit adultery. And the events King David is most famous for, the breaking of all 10 commandments over a period of 9 months. Did anybody else miss that when you read that through that a few times? But when you read through that account, and you compare it to Exodus chapter 20, that man was just like mad at God, and he's just like, boom, 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 and he's looking for a way to break these commandments. He's so angry. All right, but the two that Nathan, the prophet, lists, and before he's interrupted, I think, or before he just finished the list, rather than cite the entire chapter, 20th chapter of Exodus, the two that he is most famous for, and the two that Nathan the prophet listed, were, you shall not commit adultery and you shall not commit murder. Before that, he committed the one that says, you shall not have any other gods before me. Okay, so here we are. And then it happened. We're going to read straight out of 2 Samuel chapter 11. And then it happened in the spring. Leave it to Avenel to always know where the Kleenex is. Thank you, girl. Before I snot all over everything, huh? That's okay, I'll shove it in my pocket. All right. Okay, anybody fallen asleep yet? Okay. So we're going to read straight out of 2 Samuel 11, verse 1. And then it happened in the spring, at the time when kings go out to battle, that David sent Joab and his servants with him, and all Israel, and they destroyed the sons of Ammon and besieged Rabbah, but David stayed in Jerusalem. Now when evening came, David arose from his bed and walked around on the roof of the king's house, and from the roof he saw a woman bathing, and the woman was very beautiful in appearance. So David sent and inquired about the woman, and someone said, is this not Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, the wife of Uriah the Hittite? And then David sent messengers and took her, and she came to him, and he lay with her, for she was cleansed from her impurity, and she returned to her house. So let's pause for a moment to ask the question uppermost in everyone's mind when we get to this event in Bathsheba's life. Did David and Bathsheba have a consensual one-night stand, or was she raped? Let's look at the evidence. 1, what time is it? It's twilight. In 1000 BC, in a city, men rose with the sun and retired with the sunset, all of them. And they also did this in the country, but it's significant that it was going on in the city. Cities spread out like this. All of the city has rooftops that are flat with short little pony walls, about this high, to keep the kids from falling off the roof. But they use the rooftop like we would use a patio, and it was like an extra room. They slept downstairs down below where it was. Anyway, you get it. Let's look at the evidence. What time is it? It's twilight. In 1000 BC, men rose with the sun and they retired with the sunset, all of them. What was Bathsheba doing this leading up to this event? She was bathing on a rooftop. At the same time of the day, all women in the city took their baths on their rooftops just after sunset, which was the only time of the day and place to do so after all of the men in the city and the rest of their families had gone to bed for the night. This tells us it was David who invaded Bathsheba's privacy, not Bathsheba who seduced her neighbor.
Amen. Great job.
What was David doing in this moment leading up to this event? David had already gone to bed, and then he deliberately decided to get out of bed, climb the ladder to his rooftop, and then bow over one of the massive cedar pony walls enclosing his rooftop terrace to see exactly what he knew he would see at this time of the evening. When he got there, 1, an image of a naked woman created in the image of God. 2, taking her bath in a basin of water below him. 3, on the rooftop of her house beneath him. He has just deliberately busted the second of the 10 commandments. Remember how mad he is? Exodus 20, you shall not make for yourself an image in the form of anything in heaven above, or on the earth beneath, or in the waters, let's just say bath waters, below. You shall not bow down to them or worship them. You shall not bow down to them. It's a pony wall. Beams, cedar. I mean, he has to work at this, girls. I'm so mad at him. I like the picture of Uriah better. Okay. Next, David asked who she is, and someone said, "Is this not Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, the wife of Uriah the Hittite?" This verbiage reminds David of her current marital status. If you want to learn how to do that, there's the birth name, and then your address, and then all of the other names somebody ascribed to they were like train cars, and they were like court records, and their documents. They didn't have court records back then, so everything was attached to your birth name, like train cars. All right. So, all right, where was I? David asked who she is, and someone said, "Is this not Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, the wife of Uriah?" This verbiage reminds us, David, of her current marital status. She is betrothed, and that Uriah is awaiting for the king to choose the day of the wedding. It also tells him that Uriah has not chosen to give in to the temptation to finish arranging his marriage to Bathsheba with a rope and an oath. Samuel reports David's next choice. He coveted his neighbor's wife, and he took her. Then David sent messengers and took her, and she came to him, and he lay with her. Nathan the prophet's report uses the same word Samuel used. "Why have you despised the commandment of the Lord, to do evil in his sight? You have killed Uriah the Hittite with the sword, and you have taken his wife to be your wife, and you have killed him with the sword of the people of Ammon." According to Logos Bible Sense Lexicon, this really big, cool thing in my computer, it's like the only thing in the world in that computer I understand how to use. In Hebrew, the word took is lakak, which means, here we go, Paula, to take physically, to seize, to grip, to grab, to catch, and to seize by force. Wow. I think if the palace police came busting into my home and arrested me in this way without cause, I'd just be more than a little terrified. Yeah? Likewise, the word lay in 2 Samuel is shakab, which means to mate, to have sexual intercourse, to fornicate. This same word is used to describe Dinah's rape in Genesis 34. Now, Dinah, the daughter of Leah, whom she had borne to Jacob, went out to see the daughters of the land, and when Shechem, the son of Hamor the Hivite, the prince of the country, saw her, he took her and lay with her, and he violated her. However, here's an interesting twist. It is not the same word used in Tamar's rape in 2 Samuel 13, anah, which means to, and I quote, violate sexually, to force someone to have sex against their will, unquote. One chapter later, God will hold David accountable for this union, but not confront Bathsheba with any wrongdoing. This detail is very important. According to the law, if a betrothed woman had sex with another man in a city, both the man and the woman were to be stoned, even if she was raped. The only way for a woman to avoid being accused of adultery was to cry for help when she was being raped. This provided at least 2 to 3 witnesses who could come forward and testify on her behalf. That Nathan the prophet was not sent to confront Bathsheba too is significant and makes me wonder if she did cry out for help. But incredulously, not one person in the palace, full of people, and a city full of other women risked their lives to bust through the door to David's home to come to her rescue. A quick side note. Again, over the next 9 months, David will break all 10 of the commandments, not just adultery and murder, in his own private war against the God he currently despises, that's a strong word, before being confronted by Nathan the prophet and repenting of his sin. Why does David despise God during this time? I wish I could tell you that, but I can't say today. Let me just say that Bathsheba is a casualty of this war, and I believe David was dead drunk the night this took place. But along with the contents of Proverbs 31, we'll have to save this rabbit trail for another day. This brings us to the next chapter in Bathsheba's life. Bathsheba becomes a mother and a widow. 2 Samuel 11:5, and the woman conceived. So she sent and told David and said, I am with child. Uh-oh, David has a big problem now. What can he do? As the only man qualified to have arranged Uriah's betrothal, David's plan for solving this problem appears ridiculously simple. All he has to do is finish arranging Uriah's marriage by bringing his neighbor home from the war, and then tell him to go and fetch his bride and consummate his marriage, while David hosts his wedding supper for 7 to 14 days, just long enough for everyone to know that it's time to celebrate the conception of their first child, and then make a speech to close Uriah's wedding. Phew, he's home free after that, and he can let another man raise his baby and erase his mistake, provided Bathsheba is willing to keep her mouth shut. And so, 2 Samuel 11:6, then David sent to Joab, saying, send me Uriah the Hittite. So Joab sent Uriah to David. After Uriah arrived in Jerusalem, David spent the next several days trying to convince his neighbor to go home and sleep with his bride. But Uriah is an honorable man, and he refuses to go home, saying, 2 Samuel 11, the ark and Israel and Judah are staying in the temporary shelter, and my lord Joab and the servants of the Lord are camping in the open field. Shall I then go to my house to eat and to drink and to lie with my wife? By your life and by the life of your soul, I will not do this thing. Uriah has just made an oath. He's just made an oath. He's not going to break it. You just didn't break an oath back then. If you made an oath, You were stuck with that oath. There was no, oh, gee, sorry, I didn't mean that. Oh, well. Okay, and so he spends the whole week sleeping in the barracks with the rest of David's servants. At the end of the week, David summons him one last time, gets him drunk. Clue. And when he still won't relent, the next morning he sends Uriah back to the war with handwritten direct orders for Commander Joab. One can only imagine the big fat lie in this letter, thou shalt not lie, that Joab would read the contents of these orders and not question its contents. And Uriah had no idea that these orders were to have him assassinated by the sword of Ammon. Commander Joab does exactly as he's told. He strategically places Uriah at the place on the battlefield where he will certainly be killed, and he was. David was now free to initiate his plan B. With Uriah dead, David will arrange another illegitimate marriage for himself, this time to Bathsheba, and then simply tuck her and their unborn child into his harem with his other wives and concubines. His problem will be solved as soon as Bathsheba has finished mourning. 2 Samuel 12. When the wife of Uriah heard that Uriah, her husband, was dead, she mourned for her husband. And so, to expose the brokenness of her heart, still beating in her chest without him, Bathsheba would have torn her tunic, covered herself in dust and ashes by rolling in them, sprinkling more on her head, and then walking barefoot around the city, crying out to God in agonizing wails for a week at least. To amplify this sound, wealthy families even hired others and musicians to wail with them. But Uriah's ewe lamb was poor. He had no relatives, and all of his friends were on the battlefield in Rabbah. She would have wailed through the streets of Jerusalem, accompanied only by Uriah's children. And how long she mourned was up to her. 2 Samuel 12, 26. And when her mourning was over, David sent and brought her to his house. And she became his wife and bore him a son. But the thing that David had done displeased the Lord. So let's talk about Bathsheba's second marriage. It's now 994 BC. And when the time of her mourning was over, David sent and brought Bathsheba to his house, and she became his wife, and she bore him a son. But the thing that David had done displeased the Lord. Didn't I just read that? Okay. And so the Lord sent Nathan the prophet to David to confront him with his crimes, and he said, and here's the parable of the little ewe lamb in its entirety. There were two men in one city, one rich and the other poor. The rich man had exceedingly many flocks and herds, but the poor man had nothing except one little ewe lamb, which he had bought and nourished, and it grew up together with him and his children. It ate of his own food and drank from his own cup, and it lay in his bosom, and it was like a daughter to him, cherished it. And a traveler came to the rich man, who refused to take from his own flock and from his own herd to prepare one for the wayfaring man who had come to him. But he took the poor man's lamb and prepared it for the man who had come to him. And so David's anger was greatly aroused against the man, and he said to Nathan, as the Lord lives, he's making a vow. As the Lord lives, he's making a vow on the life of the Lord. I mean, this is big stuff. As the Lord lives, the man who has done this shall surely die, and he shall restore fourfold for the lamb, because he did this thing, and he had no pity. Then Nathan said to David, you are the man. Thus says the Lord God of Israel, I anointed you king over Israel, and I delivered you from the hand of Saul, and I gave you your master's house and your master's wives into your keeping, and gave you the house of Israel and Judah. And if that had been too little, I also would have given you much more. Why have you despised the commandment of the Lord to do evil in his sight? You have killed Uriah the Hittite with the sword of the people of Ammon. Now, therefore, the sword shall never depart from your house, because you have despised me, and you have taken the wife of Uriah Hittite to be your wife. Thus says the Lord, behold, I will raise up adversity against you from your own house, and I will take your wives before your eyes and give them to your neighbor. and he shall lie with your wives in the sight of this sun. For you did it secretly, but I will do this thing before all Israel, before the sun. Here's a quick side note. Who is David's neighbor in this part of the Bible? His neighbor is his next closest kinsman. It's Absalom, his son. So he's talking about how your son, your firstborn son, is going to go commit all of this adultery, and I'm going to do it right underneath your own eyes with your son, and use your son to do it. Wow. Okay. This gives David quite a jolt. I don't know if you have kids, and if God had said that to me about my son, that would have jolted me into reality, huh, Jamie? Yeah, look at her shaking her head over there. So David immediately repented. He immediately repented. So David said to Nathan, I have sinned against the Lord. And Nathan said to David, the Lord has also put away your sin, and you shall not die. That's a picture of grace. However, because by this deed you have given great occasion to the enemy of the Lord to blaspheme, the child also is born to you shall die. And there again we have that, another one of these typological pictures that I don't need to explain because you guys I'm preaching to the choir here. So this baby is going to die in David's place, the same way that the Son of God has died for us. Can you imagine what David must be thinking now? Oh, wow, this baby that I have, he's not going to make it. You've got to be kidding. Lord, change your mind. Change your mind. Change your mind. He spends a week trying to wait for God to change his mind, and he doesn't. And the Lord struck the child that Uriah's wife bore to David, and he became ill. And then on the seventh day, it came to pass that the child died. On the seventh day postpartum, without a name. They named their babies on the 8th day postpartum, and they circumcised them too. And so this little boy, he's cut off from Israel. It's a picture. He's cut off from Israel. He's cut off from his tribe. He's cut off from his family. He is not circumcised. He's not one of them, and he has no name. That grabbed my mother's heart. It just, all right. I'll cry. Let's not cry. Okay. In 9 months, Bathsheba has lost both her husband and her son. I can't imagine anything more devastating. There's only one thing that keeps a woman's heart beating after these kinds of things: the strength of the Lord and faith in the promise of her coming Messiah. The true light of the world, Uriah the Hittite, died worshiping as he laid down his life for his friends. I can't read that clock. How am I doing for time here? It's 1 o'clock. I'm over time already. Okay. All right, here we go. Bathsheba's remaining years. This brings us to the remaining chapters in Bathsheba's life in her second marriage, an illegitimate marriage at this point, I might add. By his own works, a very repentant David now owes Bathsheba a debt fourfold of the life of her husband and her son. But how do you put a price tag on such a debt as this and multiply it times 4? It is incalculable, even priceless. Only God can help David repay such a debt, which begins in 2 Samuel 12:24. Then David comforted Bathsheba, his wife, and went into her, and he lay with her. So she bore a son, and he called his name Solomon. I don't know about you, but Paul and Carrie and I were talking about, it's like, how in the world could, the thing that doesn't get said there is that in order for Bathsheba to sleep with the guy that murdered her husband and sleep with the guy that is responsible for the death of her baby, she had to forgive him, guys. She had to. It doesn't say that, but I don't know about you, but I'd have just crawled into the harem and curled up in a little ball, and when the king said, come, I'd have said, heck no. The king can come to me, and I'll be waiting with a knife. You know? You think, I got a sword too. You know, I'm not coming to the king. But she went to the king, and they conceived Solomon. And the only way you can do that is the power of forgiveness. Again, the Bible doesn't say these in the criminal record that Samuel documented. But forgiveness, Paul and I were talking about this a few minutes with Carrie, and forgiveness isn't saying she excused what David did. It doesn't. It says the word forgiveness means she turned it over, like flipping a pancake. She turned this over to God and trusted him for justice, trusted him for restoration. She cried out to God. She trusted him. That's what I think she did. Anyway, that's Karen being eisegetical. So, but I think I'm on the right track here, don't you? All right. Where was I? By his own words. Okay. Then David comforted Bathsheba, his wife, and went into her, and he lay with her. So she bore a son, and he called his name Solomon, which means peace. Her second marriage also begins with living in David's harem with 6 other illegitimate wives, 10 other unnamed wives whose job it is just to keep the palace neat and tidy for him, plus an unspecified number of other wives and concubines. And trust me, she did not move onto the movie set of the Brady Bunch. David's sons with his other wives are self-centered, uncontrollable, and violent. Her stepson Amnon will rape his sister Tamar shortly after her arrival. Another stepson, Absalom, will rebel against his father and initiate a civil war. Her grandfather Ahithophel will become David's enemy, commit treason, and then suicide. Nothing like having that going on in your family. Some scholars believe her father Eliam may have been one of the other servants of the king who died at Uriah's side in their battle array in Rabbah, and that Ahithophel's lust for revenge for his son's death precipitated his treason. She will survive a plague. Years later, another one of David's sons, Adonijah, will make a play for the throne, and with the help of Nathan the prophet, Bathsheba will have to intervene to secure Solomon's right to succession. And into all of this violence and chaos, Bathsheba bore 3 more sons, Shemiah, Shobab, and Nathan, in her 25-year marriage to David, the king of Israel. 2 of Bathsheba's sons will carry genetic lines forward to our Messiah. Nathan will carry the bloodline to Mary, the mother of Jesus, and Solomon will carry the legal line to Joseph. At some point, likely after her last son was born, and David had raised the 4-fold bride price he was required to pay and established the moment he swore a rash oath, God legitimized the marriage between David and Bathsheba to ensure Solomon's legitimate right to inherit his father's throne. It is likely, but the Bible doesn't say this either, it is likely that the bride price for the marriage was paid for with the crown David took off the head of the king of Ammon soon after he repented of his great sin and went to Rabbah to do what he was supposed to do in the first place. This crown weighed a talent of gold, and David usually divided the spoil among his men, but he took ownership. He took possession of this crown. He took it off the king's head, the Ammonite king's head, and he put it on his head. He took ownership of this crown. And it weighed a talent of gold, which today would be worth $4.5 million, just the gold, just the raw gold. And this crown had multiple gemstones in it, likely rubies. Why? Because the Ammonites were obsessed with all things red, especially things that flashed like fire, because they were obsessed. They worshipped fire. Okay, and they worshipped the goddess of fire and god of fire, and Milcom, the fire god, blah, blah, Satan. Back then and to this day, rubies never depreciate. They only appreciate, and exponentially. So the rubies just keep getting more and more and more valuable. So David's debt that he had to pay fourfold. The life of Uriah the Hittite is an incalculable, priceless, can't ever get to the end of paying that thing off debt, and rubies would have been the best currency for David to pay on that debt fourfold, to pay for the priceless value of Uriah's life fourfold. Solomon is anointed king before he is old enough to go to war. That verse that talks about, where Solomon kind of goes, but I'm not old enough to go in and out of the gates. He's talking about, I'm not old enough to go to war. You had to be 20 years old to be old enough to go to war. And that's because in the male side of the equation of bringing up a son, he had to learn how to fight and use a sword and serve in battle array beside his brother and his brothers and in battle array. He had to learn all of that before he turned 20. And at 20, then he could go to war. Look it up in the Torah if you're interested in that. I was very, very interested in that. It's like vocabulary junkies minefield. Okay, anyway. David passes away at the age of 70. In the wake of these events, Bathsheba is then given the title Gebirah, meaning the queen mother. She is also given a permanent throne at the young King Solomon's right hand. It's unheard of. Now, at the age of only about 38, Bathsheba then spent the rest of her life continuing David's unfinished work, bringing up their 4 legitimized sons, just as Uriah had once loved his little orphaned ewe lamb, his neighbor, as himself. She becomes a single parent, 38 years old, 4 little boys. I mean, wow, But I just think it's so cool how the very thing that Uriah did for her, she then continues bringing up these 4 sons. And she took this role so seriously that she and Solomon figured out, I need to be sitting at your right hand in order to be your Gebirah, the queen mother who will raise you to be a wise king and a good king. So that's what she did. There are 4 Gentile women God used to carry the genetic line forward to the Messiah, whose names are listed in his genealogy. And here's where the biblical algebra becomes interesting. If I hadn't had to take algebra twice in high school, maybe I wouldn't be so fascinated with algebra. When I found it in the Bible, I was like, oh man, okay, here we go. There are 4 Gentile women God used to carry the genetic line forward to the Messiah, whose names are listed in his genealogy. Tamar, Ruth, Rahab, and Bathsheba. Mary, the mother of Jesus, is the only other woman named in Christ's genealogy, and she's a Jew. These 4 Gentile women paint powerful pictures in the genetic line that Christ came first for the Jew and then for the Gentiles. The number 4 represents the whole earth in all directions. The number 5 represents God's amazing grace. These women inserted into Christ's genealogy perfectly illustrate the gospel in a nutshell. For God so loved the whole world, as represented by these 4 Gentile women, 4 directions on a compass, the whole world. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believes in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. For God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but that the whole world through him might be saved. Whew. It is not known when Bathsheba died, but at some point in her life, she was given a fully Hebrew name, not Hebrew plus Hebrew Arabic, a fully Hebrew name. And that name in 1 Chronicles 3:5 is in the genealogy descending from Adam. That name is Bathsheba, which means, here we go, ladies, I'm going to cry, the daughter of a cry for help. Daughter of a cry for help. Through it all, the loss of her mother, the abandonment of her father, the rape, the unexpected pregnancy, the death of her beloved first husband, the death of her firstborn son, her second marriage to King David, in a life filled with chaos, securing Solomon's right to succession and spending the rest of her life single parenting 4 sons. If my friend Mindy were here, she would say, through it all, The father to the fatherless heard her cries for help, and he intervened, and he facilitated justice on her behalf fourfold, and gave her a new birth name and a place in her Messiah's genealogy that heralds to the whole world the free gift of salvation. This brings us to Paula's twin questions. What does this woman's story teach us about living as a woman of faith? And what does this woman's story teach us about who God is? How are we doing for time? We're over? Okay. To close today, I'm going to play a video of one of my favorite songs. It is the Aaronic Blessing, and it is sung by a father and a daughter, Marty and Misha Getz, both Messianic Jews who live in Israel. As we listen to the song and watch it, the love between this father and daughter never ceases to bless my heart. And as we close, may it remind you, too, of the tenderness with which our Heavenly Father loved his little ewe lamb, and he loves you, too. Thank you for asking me, and thank you for letting me share this amazing story with you. And let's pray. Father, thank you for this time. Thank you for this teaching. Thank you for your grace that covers every single one of my sins and mistakes. Thank you for the wise counsel of our pastor here, who is just an amazing man. And Lord, just bless him. Lord, thank you for Sharon and for Paula and for all of the ladies of the Sisters' Faith, the ladies in the kitchen and Avenel who prays over all of us. And thank you, Lord, for my friends who came today. And I just pray that your peace would be on all of us as we leave this place. In Jesus' name, amen.